Andrea is a wave of fresh air that leaves no stone unturned in her quest to soothe those who hurt and are in pain. Dr. Dearhart's work as a death doula and end-of-life coach is to reverse the culturally prevalent denial of death and encourage a return to intimacy, reverence, and sanctity to death and dying. Her wish is to inspire, educate, and offer fresh and creative end-of-life options that are not typically acknowledged in our Western medicalized approach. Please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Andrea Dearhart.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I'm mic'd. Wow. How's that sound? Sound check okay? Okay. Such an honor and privilege to be here. I feel like I'm home. Such a beautiful welcoming. Well, there are many beautiful love souls out there, and I'm so tickled that so many of you got up early, first of all, to come out and hear a topic that's probably not everybody's favorite topic, in our culture especially. So very, very, very grateful. The topic of death, of course, is one that's laced with every emotion possible. So as we journey together over this next 40 minutes or so, I encourage you to be kind to yourself, allow whatever images come in and emotions, and be with what is. I don't know what might get stirred up today, but I want to honor that within yourself and hope that you can. And know that I'm reachable afterwards if something has come up that you feel in need of some support. I'd like to invite you now to just close your eyes. Find your breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Take a moment to become as fully present as you can. See if you can brush by your heart. See if you can feel the tender tissues in your body. See if there's a moment of soul energy. This is the place where we will begin our journey together, this beautiful moment, this beautiful morning. And when it feels right, let your eyelids gently lift open. So some of you may ask, what is a death doula? Me. I'm a death doula. A death doula is someone that assists, guides, nurtures, and companions at the end of life, assisting someone through that path that they must walk alone. The Greek root of doula means a woman who serves. Okay? A doula can be of any gender, of course. And the interesting thing is doulas comes from all kinds of walks of life. You'd be very surprised at what their experience is. A death doula offers guide to family members, for example, in the physical, emotional, spiritual aspects of supporting a loved one as they're passing. As many of you know, the trials and tribulations of this, from the trauma to the emotions, to the uncertainties, to the long hours, to the pain, to the intimacy of companioning somebody at the end of life. A death doula is an advocate for the family with other end-of-life institutions such as hospitals and hospices, funeral parlors, any organization that is touched with at the end of life. And for For the dying, a death doula offers companionship, support, sometimes just that right ear to hear, to listen, where they may be afraid to speak their voice in other places. Sometimes as a death doula, I hold someone's hand. I crawl in bed with someone. I cry with them. I sing with them. I hold them. I listen. Sometimes we dance. The plethora of emotions and experiences with someone towards the end of life is beyond any words I'll be able to come up with today. There are also, part of being a death doula has to do with a lot of afterlife care. As a death doula, I anoint, I bathe, I dress, I adorn, and prepare somebody for their final resting place after they die. Sometimes by myself in ritual, sometimes with family members. As a death doula, I conduct, teach, educate, support, and love end-of-life in-home funerals. So you may not be aware of that. I'll just put this little jewel out there that you can keep your loved one home for many days after they die. Okay. The average person doesn't quite know that. And then we create an in-home funeral, a sacred space for loved ones to come and do vigil and spend time with their loved ones, to say goodbye and hold them. As you can imagine, a mother that's lost their baby at birth, to be able to carry their baby home and have some time to share all their hopes and dreams before they have to put this little bundle to rest, can be very sacred and healing in the grieving process. These are all special and sacred, and what really truly help us in the transcendence and the transformation at the end of life. Through the ancient art of storytelling, my hopes this morning is to weave a tapestry of image that represent the journey of death, of a death doula, from the breath of death to divine love. My hopes and intention of these sharings with you is to exhume the spiritual dimension of death, lost to our culture conversation of fear and denial and loss, in the hopes of understanding in death that allows us for the spiritual awakening of the soul. The breath of death. My body dies, my spirit soars in blackness. A deep abyss of fear and darkness gray. Time stills, time soars, time timeless. My breath escapes. What more shall I say? Divine, beloved death embraces my soul. The universe was one, or so it seemed today. Oh, to surrender to the unknown soul. Surrender to the mystery of life. Surrender to the starless, empty whole. May I speak to thy unspeakable strife. May you embrace this poem of beloved. May you lose yourself on the edge of life. My just breath vanished, my vision grieved, my tears flowed behind the shadowy veil. My love submerged and emerged, thy beloved. A glimpse shadow expression of my veil. I see Hades dancing in soul's darkness. Behind the veil, I see only travail. Death arouses life. Life infects sickness. What is the lyrical interlude of being? The place of love's breath enlopes one's darkness. Death's soul is out of my mind's foreseen. Finite Infinite, am I truly dead? Outward, inward, beyond one's reasoning. The mystic mirror reflects evil dread, my mirror dust from beloved times that reflects my beauty and ego shed. Death tears the fibers of thy rhymes. I hear the verdict of my soul. I lay down my corpse to God's hard times. Death begins life. Life ends in timeless soul. This is thy moment of resurrection. Life loves lost, earnest, descending dark hole. There are truly no words to describe what it's like to hold someone as they take their last breath of death. Many of you I know have experienced that and will join me in some of these understandings. Others hopefully will imagine and have that opportunity in their life to touch the mystery of our life. After holding hundreds as they take their last breath, my breath escapes as well. No one dies the same, and I am forever changed with each soul that I touch. Each soul that I touch provides me with a new landscape to the meaning of this existence and beyond. I'm often asked with disgust or a sneer, you do what and why? Isn't this depressing? Depressing never enters my mind. Sad, difficult, arduous, beautiful, intimate, beyond words, and awe-inspiring are more the adjectives that enter my heart and soul as I do this work. I have a little quip that says, death inspires life and life inspires death. I live this way. Death inspires life for me. I am truly, those of you that know me, I think might give me a little nod, am grateful for each breath I take. Not that I don't have difficult times, not that there's not tragedy in my life, but the grace, the beauty, and in all its difficult and challenging glory, this life that we have. And I have to say, after all these years, death is what teaches me that. Death is what teaches me that. So that I am truly grateful for. I also cannot not do this work. And I am beyond words grateful to have the honor and privilege with each call I get, whether it's in the middle of the night or early in the morning. There's a gratitude to be in service to those in need. Well, what is my experience of a death doula? I shared probably one of the core, that it inspires my life. It taught me death, how death transcends our fears and creates the transformational alchemical tincture that allows for transformation in our life. If you think about for just a second, maybe sorry to do this to you, but enter to a difficult time in your life, a disappointment, a tragedy, an unexpected loss, something. In hindsight now, my guess is you'll find something in that moved you somewhere in your life, either deeper or to a new opening. As a door shuts, a window may open. It may be locked and bolted and take a while to get it open, but that pathway. So that's what I'm talking about. That's a lot of what death provides for me. The transformation is amazing. I'd like to share an example with you, a poignant one, of a death experience that helps that the family and the person that was dying transcended their fears and transformed life. This is a work I had the honor of doing with a 90-year-old Holocaust survivor a few years ago. Her name is Lori, and with her 2 adult daughters. I'm going to read you a little memoir I wrote on it, if I might. I'd spent more than 18 months working with a venerated Holocaust survivor, mother and grandmother, therapeutically focusing on her terrors of the Holocaust and her severe fear of death. Up until this time in her life, she had never spoken much about her pain, her loss, and her suffering that resulted from being in a concentration camp, separated from her family at a very young age. As time passed, in our many sessions, she began to remember memories that she had never remembered before through the traumatic experiences in her mind. She courageously faced the fears she could recall about the Holocaust and death. However, her daughter, as we neared the mother's death, became more frightened and more anxious about her mother's imminent passing. She wept. "I don't want to be near her when she dies. I can't handle this." The eldest daughter shared that she was unable to be present for her father some years before when he died. She had never been near death and reported that she became physically ill at the thought of being close to death, let alone her mother's death. When her mother was in her final hours of her life, I asked both her daughters if they desired to be present at their mother's death. They were both exhausted, physically and emotionally, from hours and hours and days of support and love and nurturing. They decided to leave. They said their goodbyes at about midnight and silently left their mother's side. I stayed for a bit. Sometimes when loved ones leave the room, the person that's on their path to death chooses to die. They choose often not to die when a loved one's in the room. It's kind of what they think the final gift is. And many will say, "I didn't want to see that image, and I didn't want to leave that image." Personally, the image is beautiful. I stayed for a while, and I read her stories from a beautiful, sweet book called Graceful Passages. It's out on the table there if you want to peek at it. It's a book I use with all my clients. It's got CDs with music in it, and it's beautiful stories and encouragements and a little bit of a hand-holding on this journey. I read some poems to her. I gently kissed her goodbye, this matriarch goodbye, and I too headed home to rest as I knew death was near. As I prepared for bed, laid my head on the pillow, the phone rang. Lori had taken her last breath. Directly, I headed back to her home and began the rituals of honoring her transition. Both daughters appeared. With the eldest standing at the door, we embraced and slipped into silence, tears, and reverence. After a brief time, I asked permission to start the end-of-life rituals. The youngest daughter did not show any signs of fears. Her fearlessness became evident as she joined me in the end-of-life rituals of her mother, of bathing, anointing, adorning, and dressing her mother for final dispensation or burial. I inquired if the eldest daughter wished to be present or to wait for us in the living room. I placed a chair halfway into the room and halfway out into the hall. She chose to sit in the chair at the edge of the room. She had chosen to sit at the thresholds of her emotions. For the next 2.5 hours, the youngest daughter and I bathed and anointed her body with lavender oil, dressed her, adorned her with jewels and flowers, brushed her hair, loved her, wept, told stories, played music. The eldest daughter, still sitting at the edge of the room, held tightly to her mother's socks as we worked. I waited till the rituals were completed, and then I tenderly reached out my hand for the socks. She held those socks ever so tightly near her heart and said, "I would like to place these socks on my mother." My breath escaped as I understood what an unfathomable transition this was for her. Tears flowed down all our cheeks. 2 months after we buried this beautiful woman, the eldest daughter shared being present at the end of life rituals, touching her mother literally in death and her fears of death. Life became ever so immediate and precious to her. She also shared the peacefulness she felt and the positive changes that she had begun to make in her life since her mother's death. This was something that she was unable to accomplish before her mother's death experience. She touched death. She smelled death. She heard death, literally, emotionally, and spiritually, and transcended death back into a more meaningful life for herself. This story is a tangible example of my position and absence, such a visceral and present experience of death. The contemporary attitude about the denial of death has evolved past the ideology of denial towards an attitude of almost invisible death. Much like the eldest daughter, many just avoid facing the issue of mortality by running from it, both mentally and physically. These avoidant behaviors and thought patterns make it really difficult, if not impossible, to find meaning in death, and I contend in life. What have I derived from all these years of being a death doula? After many years, a doctorate degree in mythology and depth psychology focusing on death, dying, and beyond of cultural mythologies from around the world, world religions, and comparative literature, I have proud to say that I have not developed an ideology yet. And may I never. I personally think that's the challenge right now. We've put death in a box with a ribbon on it. It's not boxable. It's not boxable. Now, I want to enter a little bit into the medicalization of death. Excuse me one second. Which is our current myth, our current living myth of death, and it is our current ideology of death. Before I say another word about it, I want you to hear loud and clear that I'm not opposed to the medicalization of death. It's very necessary. But if we do the old pie adage, it's just a piece of the pie. But it's necessary in many ways. We've created a monolithic, almost one-dimensional approach to death, focused on medication, money, and an egoic aspects of dying and death. Psyche and soul are not considered. This is why the Heart Way does not charge for end-of-life services and will never if I'm still here to do that. I don't believe money belongs in this sacred time of life. It's oxymoronic to the experience. That's the last thing, it's the last thing that I want a family or a loved one to worry about. How are they going to pay me? Sometimes I'm there for hours and days. You can't put a dollar amount on it. Hence, nonprofit and the generosity of the community and 80 hours of work a week to help me to move this mission forward and support. Let me say just a little bit more about the medicalization of death, if I might. I believe there's a lot of hindering in the medicalization of death. My dissertation thesis was Death Beyond Denial. That's that small little book out there. I'm not ready to separate with it. I just completed it this year. So, I talk a lot about, in Death Beyond Denial, the medicalization of death. So I'm just going to scratch the surface here for you a little bit. But I think it really does hurt our transformational opportunities in death when we highly medicalize death. The list is huge. I'll just speak to a couple points of it. And one of the points that is huge for me is actually the overuse of drugs at the end of life. Now, we have the gambit of humans that, in fact, one person in the room always shares with me, give me the magic bullet. And the magic bullet is, I don't want to be conscious, I don't want any pain, no problem whatsoever. And then you have everything in between on the other spectrum, like me, who doesn't want to miss a minute. Are you kidding? I've spent my life on this work. I don't want to miss a minute of this. And I may ask for that drug when I need it as well. Nobody knows the journey. And in conversation as I was preparing to share with you today, a beautiful person in my life said to me, you know what you do, Andrea? And I said, no, tell me. And he said, you allow. And that just sunk, allow. Why do I need to allow? Nobody needs my permission. But it really is about allowing us to enter that sacred space, whatever that is for us, because we have so many worries. Should we? Could we? What about this? What about that? And when we drop into our own mythology, if you will, we're going to be more freed to be present. So it doesn't matter if someone wants lots of drugs or not. To me, what matters is nurturing and cultivating what that experience desires for the person. And it may change in the middle of the action, and that's okay. Nothing is nailed. The coffin is not nailed down, pun intended. Okay. So having those options are important. And currently, we're not given as many of those options. We medicate for emotions. We medicate for pain, thank goodness. And we medicate for death. Uh-oh. Dying is not painful. Cancer is painful. A broken bone is painful. Those are painful. Taking our last breath is coming in for landing. It's an exhalation. But because of our anxiety and our fears, we medicate that. The conversations are not happening. That's what I do as a death doula, is have those conversations so that we can feel our way through. Okay. I also want to go back to Lori for a minute and share with you another aspect of the medicalization, how much it interfered with the experience for the family. I was with her for 18 months, as I shared, working on many levels. So we're about 2-3 weeks away from her death, which I did not know at that particular moment in time, of course. P.S. Nobody can call death, by the way. Come close. I can come close, but it's still a mystery. So Lori's pain was elevating. Pain was out of control. Her breathing became very, very labored. And she ended up in the emergency room. The daughter called me. I'm on my way to the ER. I met him in the ER. They did their investigation. They did their labs. They did their x-rays and came up with nothing. This was, I will say it because I'm not under any, it was Kaiser. Sent her home. This is just one instance. Sent her home. Pain kept going out of control. No pain meds. I went in the middle of the night to get her meds. No hospital bed, no oxygen. Okay. Had the talk with the family. I think it's time. Put her on hospice to pull in some extra home care. She was in a lovely boarding care at the time. Hospice nurse came in and evaluated her, qualified her for end of life. the hospice medical director refused end-of-life care. I want to add at this particular time, she died 10 days later. So this was a 48-hour period of, I can't even tell you the pain and suffering. I can't even tell you the hours on the phone with Kaiser. And luckily, I work with any hospice I'll work with, one in particular that I love and I call in when I can. And they came to the rescue within 3 hours. I had her on oxygen. I had a hospital bed for her. I had her pain meds, and she was impacted. So this impacted her as well. Very painful, but after that, she slipped into a peaceful state of what I call liminality, that place from being present and that place from taking the transition to beyond. And she ended up having a beautiful death experience. So why do I bring this up? I bring this up because the reason she didn't get hospice service from this particular organization was because she didn't meet on paper what the regulations required. Now, I don't blame Kaiser. Well, okay. Sorry. I can be real. I was pissed. I've never been more angry in my life. I couldn't believe it. And what took me to my knees when the daughter called sobbing this Thursday morning, saying, weeping, can't a Holocaust survivor get a break? That was it. Advocacy, terror came out. But she didn't meet the paper requirement. She died 10 days later. Okay? The regulations on hospice is 6 months or less, a terminal diagnosis. So we got what she needed and it moved. But that's just an example of how the medicalization can do more harm at times. Can do more harm at times. I cannot not touch right to die. It's active, it's in the news. California, I know you know this, I'll just say it out loud, is not a right to die state. Oregon, Montana, and Vermont, I believe, are the 3 states that are right to die at this moment. Who has that right? Doctors, nurses, family members, you, God. Who has that right? You're going to have to answer that one. However, I can share I advocate for the right to die. I advocate for the right to die and for the conversation, whether it's for you to choose it, whether it's your faith, whether it's a discussion with the family, it matters not, but the discussion about it. So I will be advocating for that legislation as soon as I get a breath, which I don't have at this moment. And I encourage you to explore that contemplation with yourself and your families. I also want to say something pretty risque here in that we do euthanize people here. We just don't call it that. When you push morphine at the end of life, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. But we're not calling it that. So again, remember that ideology thing I don't have? I invite you in to what that exploration and what that meaning is for you. We can't wrap death in a box. We can't wrap it in medical needs. It's not scientific, although there are aspects of it. There's a whole biological process. It's not just emotional. It's the integration. In our dualistic thinking, sometimes we have it either or, but it's really and it's and that's the full richness of life. My most heartfelt desire of this bodyist work may prevent fear-laden, lonely people in institutional closet end of life. That's where my heart passion comes in this work. The Buddha offers a teaching on the development of loving kindness known as the Metta Sutta. His hope in this teaching was to instill a sincere wish for contentment in all beings. I'd like to share with you my metta wish for the dying. May the dying be met with noble, mindful, and loving support. May the dying be peaceful and at ease with pain, suffering, and death. May the dying have the right to choose treatment of care and the right to die. May the dying have the opportunity to bask in their dreams, imagination, and personal expression of death. May the dying, if they choose, be given the means to die outside the myth of the medicalized death. May the dying inhabit their mind, body, and soul in a way that allows them to find their freedom in their song, dance, and love. May the dying feel the freedom to express her or his truth. May the dying die and the living live. Probably the most significant jewel that I have from my work is, as a death doula, is the only aspect of life that matters is love. Nobody at the end of life cares about what they did, what they bought, what they saw, how much they have. Nobody. Well, if you are concerned about telling their children where they hid the money, that comes up as well. That comes up as well. I'd like to leave you, and I'm going to open up for some questions. I'll have time, yeah? 5 minutes? I leave you with the final journey and the heartbeat of life and death, divine love. I felt the absence of my humanness. The remembrance fades in cosmic gray. Now I am suspended in absurdness. How can one delay drifting away? Oh, to surrender to the mystic soul. Divine love's embrace, how else can I pray? I drift in thy one consecrated soul. I rejoice in existence after life. Love surprisingly blinds my yielding soul. I pilgrim through the poetry of life. The lyricist dwells in the internal tapestry of thy one immortal strife. I hear the poet musing maternal submission to the lasting void of love. Divine love humbles my endless kernel. Thy inspiration is suggested of death's true divinity within the one. Love discerns death, death discerns life, one love. Aries pricks the devout essential one. My ego dies, my heart's cry, I thrash through. I pray for redemption, thy godly one. Oh, how love symbolizes the true hue of thy mysterious tremendum guise. Let thy truth shine vibrantly through and through. I witness this truth in all human cries, feeling the throbbing beat upon my chest. The memories, the dreams, never dies. Hear the sounds of the universal chimes. These sounds rejoice in our collective soul. Can you feel the divine love in these times? The beginning, the ending are the same goal. Creation is one's only reflection of death's timeless, undying, loving soul. Thy breath, thy love, thy beloved are one. Oh. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So touched.
Andrea, is this on? No, no. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, now. Thank you so much. I see you as kind of a match in a dark room, shedding light on a very difficult topic. I thank you so much for the help that you gave me and Jeff through a hard time. I only found out about you through David about 3 weeks before Jeff died, and you were the day before vacation, and you said, call me on my vacation if you need me. And you were there amazingly, so often and so beautifully. So this right to die, it seems to me that with hospice, one has the right to die, even if the state isn't allowing it. Because once they come in, you don't even need a coroner to come afterwards, where everywhere else you do. And they bring in the drugs, and it's kind of up to the family, and they're amazing. So, and is hospice all around the country, or are there places where it isn't? So those are my questions to you.
Okay. Great questions. Hospice is all over. In some rural areas, there may not be as reaching of a hospice. The challenge with hospice these days is, I'm going to say expression, it's harsh, but it fits for me, is they sold their soul to insurances in the mid-90s. So that's their guiding influence. And their work is exquisite. I want you to hear that. I bring a hospice in with I was a hospice social worker for many years. I left hospice when they started to come in and tell me I had X amount of time, I had to see X amount of clients in a day, and I wasn't going to say hurry up and die. So they are limited with what they can do. Bless their hearts. Social workers, and I'm friends with many hospice social workers, have caseloads that are high, so they don't have time for the conversations often. We had many of those which were so beautiful. So it's not an anti-hospice at all. It's about deepening the opportunity to expand hospice's needs. Many times they don't express what all the options are. For example, most hospices come in with a mortuary list. Here you go. You don't have to hire a mortuary in the state of California. You can do it yourself. And for many families, mortuary costs are huge. It's the third largest cost for a family. So we can do that for ourselves if we choose. So it's just limited. I think that's the most important things. And they're regulated with medications by the laws, right? There are many of them. Usually it's a lot of medications available. So that's all my argument is, more of the conversations and more of the expanding. The right to die is choosing death. So in Oregon, for example, there's a cocktail that's made and all the paperwork to be signed, etc. And they can choose when to end their life within hours or minutes. We don't have that in the state of California. Hospice will support and nurture you. And for some, the end of life is long, is drawn out, is painful, and people can't find quality of life in that, and they want to end this. No judgment on that at all. The right to die allows that. However, since we don't have that right to die, we can utilize that time, that suffering, and that pain to grow and to deepen. There's so many methods of pain control. Meds are one. Massage, breathing exercises, visualization. I also have a service dog. Bring Daisy into the room, and she goes and crawls in bed with my clients, whether they're living or whether they've died. So, okay. Next. Yes.
This is a little bit more on the mystical or spiritual side, but so often I've heard that as people are nearing the time of their transition, that they are speaking to loved ones who have preceded them, and many times as an older person, many of their loved ones have preceded them, that experience, and then about the energy actually leaving the room. If you sense that, you didn't address any of those things, if you would.
I only have 45 minutes. And am I done? Oh. Reader's Digest version. A lot of people die and see loved ones. They see them in the room, they see them in their vision. There's a liminal state that happens. When it's drug-induced, it's shifted, and we don't get an interaction with it. When someone dies without drugs, there's a lot more interaction. These can be dream states, these could be visions, it could be all of the above. To me, it doesn't matter. Being present to it does. And not saying, no, he's not there. Engaging, who do you see, what's going on? Life review is happening, all kinds of processes are happening. They're experiencing things I'll never know or understand until I get there, so I honor that. As far as energy leaving the room with the person that's died, it's significant, it's felt physically, it's felt emotionally, and it's felt spiritually. That's what moved me into the work as a hospice volunteer. My first patient died in my arms and took my breath with it. I'm so sorry we ran out of time, but my contact information is there. If there's something you're dying to ask or share with me, don't hesitate. All my information is there. It is my honor and privilege. If you enjoyed the poetry that I read, I'm so proud I wrote it. There's a copy for you on the way out of both The Breath of Death and Divine Love. I welcome you to take that into your heart. I thank you beyond words. This has been exquisite.
You are an angel.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.